Hi, in this video we will read about retinopathy of prematurity from Cloharty, page number 1031. Let's start. So, retinopathy of prematurity (ROP) typically develops in premature infants less than 30 weeks and 30 weeks of gestation or weighing less than 1500 grams at birth. Fine. Who are at risk of developing this retinopathy of prematurity? Basically, it's in the name only. No, it's in the premature. So, premature infants less than 30 weeks of gestation or weighing less than 1500 grams at birth. Other risk factors include prolonged or labile oxygen exposure and increased illness severity. Fine, if a long term oxygen is supplied, then that also increases the risk of ROP. Fine. Other risk factors are prolonged or labile oxygen exposure and increased illness severity. The risk of ROP increases with the decreasing gestational age. The timing of first screening by an ophthalmologist is critical and based on the post menstrual age. Let's read about the general principles, its definition. Retinopathy of prematurity is a multifactorial vasoproliferative retinal disorder that increases in incidence with decreasing gestational age. Fine. It is what? How are we going to define it? That it is a multifactorial vasoproliferative retinal disorder. It is a disorder of retina in which there is a vasoproliferative component which is uh, affected, and it is multifactorial. So this multifactorial vasoproliferative retinal disorder in which that increases in incidence with the decreasing gestational age. Lower the gestational age, higher the chances of incidence of this ROP. Under current screening guidelines, about 43% of the infants develop ROP and 12.5% develop severe ROP. However, the risk is higher for those with lower birth weight and earlier gestational age. More than 95% of the infants with the birth weight of less than 900 gram or gestational age less than 24 weeks develop ROP. More than 95% infants. Fine. This is a very common thing and we should know about it. Let's read about its pathogenesis. Let's read first about the normal development. After the sclera and the choroid have developed, retinal elements, including nerve fibers, ganglion cells, and the photoreceptors, migrate from the optic disc at the posterior pole of the eye and move towards the periphery. Fine. What is happening? First, the sclera and the choroid develops. Now, then the retinal elements, which include the nerve fibers, the ganglion cells, and the photoreceptors, they migrate. They migrate from where? They migrate from the optic disc at the posterior pole of the eye and move towards the. They move towards the periphery. From the optic disc, they move towards the periphery. So the photoreceptors have progressed 80% of the distance to their resting place at the ora serrata by 28 weeks of gestation. Before the retinal vessels develop, the avascular retina receives its oxygen supply by the diffusion across the retina from the choroid vessels. So before this retinal vessels, how is retina receiving blood supply? Oxygen supply by diffusion. From where? From the choroidal vessels. So the retinal vessels which arise from the spindle cells of the adventitia of the hyaloid vessel at the optic disc, they begin to migrate outward at 16 weeks of gestation. So when does this retinal vessels migrate outward? They migrate outward at 16 weeks of gestation. But the retinal vessels, they are arising from where? They are arising from the spindle cells of the adventitia of the hyaloid vessel at the optic disc. So migration is complete by 36 weeks on the nasal side and 40 weeks by the temporal side. Fine. This is complete by 36 weeks on the nasal side and by the 40 weeks on the temporal side. Coming to the possible mechanism of injury. Although many factors contribute to the development and severity, ROP is primarily an oxygen driven retinopathy. Clinical observations suggest that the onset of ROP consists of two stages. Fine, its onset of ROP consists of two stages. The first stage involves the initial insult or insults such as hyperoxia, hypoxia, or hypotension at the critical point of retinal vascularization that results in vasoconstriction and decreased blood flow to the developing retina with a subsequent arrest in the vascular development. Okay, so in the first stage, there is an initial insult, or there can be insults. And insults can be what? They can be hyperoxia, more oxygen, hypoxia, less oxygen, hypotension. At what time? At the critical point when the retinal vascularization, at the point of this retina, whole retinal vascularization, which results in what? This leads to vasoconstriction and decreased blood flow to the developing retina with a subsequent arrest of the vascular development. So the vascular development of the retina is not being developed basically. The relative hyperoxia after the birth is hypothesized to downregulate the production of growth factors. Because of hyperoxia, what is happening? It downregulates the growth factors such as vascular endothelial growth factor that are essential for the normal development of retinal vessels. So this hyperoxia is causing problem in the normal development of basically retinal vessels. Fine. This was the first stage. In the first stage, an insult happened which interfered with the development of normal retinal vessels. Okay. An insult can be mirrored, right? Hyperoxia, hypoxia, or hypotension. During the second stage, what is happening during the second stage? Neurovascularization occurs. This aberrant retinal vessel growth is thought to be driven by excess angiogenic factors such as vascular endothelial growth factor upregulated by the hypoxic avascular retina. What is happening? It's not neurovascularization, it is basically neovascularization occurs. And there is aberrant growth of the retinal vessels, and this excess growth is upregulated by what? Hypoxic vascular avascular retina. So new vessels grow within the retina and into the vitreous. These vessels are permeable. New vessels we know are right. The new vessels are permeable. Therefore, hemorrhage and edema can occur because they will contents will leak out through those new vessels. Extensive and severe extraretinal fibrovascular proliferation can lead to retinal detachment and abnormal retinal function. So we saw, right, because there is aberrant growth of the retinal vessels, and this is causing extensive and severe extraretinal fibrovascular proliferation. This can lead to what? Retinal detachment and abnormal retinal function. Okay. In most affected infants, fortunately, the disease process is mild and regress spontaneously. So we read about the possible mechanism of injury. First, we saw the normal development, how the normal development of the retinal vessels occurred, and how is the migration, and when the migration is completed. It is completed on the nasal side by 36 weeks and on the temporal side by 40 weeks. We saw the possible mechanism that an insult occurred in the first stage, which uh, interfere with the normal development of the retinal vessels, and during the second stage neovascularization occurred by. And how was the neovascularization? There was aberrant growth of the retinal vessel driven by excess angiogenic factors like VEGF, which was upregulated by what? Hypovascular retina, hypoxic avascular retina. And this new vessels grew into the retina and the vitreous, and these new vessels are permeable, which causes edema and hemorrhage. And this extensive, severe extraretinal fibrovascular proliferation, can lead to retinal detachment. So the final thing that can happen is this is retinal detachment and abnormal retinal function. Fine. Now let's read about the risk factors. ROP has been consistently associated with this ROP is associated with low gestational age, low birth weight, and prolonged oxygen exposure. In addition, potential or confirmed risk factors include liability in the oxygen requirement as well as the markers of neonatal illness severity, such as the mechanical ventilation, systemic infection, blood transfusion, intraventricular hemorrhage, and poor postnatal weight gain. So these are also potential or confirmed risk factors. In low resource settings, severe ROP can occur with the less severe prematurity, primarily due to administration of unblended oxygen, and thus screening criteria need to be modified. In this chapter, we primarily refer to the studies and guidelines in the United States and other well resourced countries. Now let's start with the diagnosis. Firstly, let's look at the screening tests. Because no extraocular signs or symptoms indicate developing ROP, timely and regular retinal examination is necessary because it has no extraocular signs or symptoms. The timing of the occurrence of ROP is related to the maturity of retinal vessels and therefore to the postnatal age. The postnatal growth and retinopathy of prematurity study reported the incidence of ROP and severe ROP in large North American cohort and premature infants who met current screening criteria during the year 2006 and 2011. Overall, 43.1% infants developed any ROP, and there was an inverse relationship between the gestational age or the birth weight and incidence of incidence and severity of ROP. Of the 12.5% of the study cohort who developed severe ROP, it occurred almost exclusively among with a birth weight of less than 1.25 kg. All the large multi-center studies have shown that the onset of ROP and severe ROP are correlated with the postmenstrual age. In the growth ROP study, stages 1, 2, and 3 ROP were first diagnosed at a postmenstrual age of 34.8 plus minus 2.9 weeks, then 35.5 plus minus 2.7, and 36.4 plus minus 2.6 weeks, respectively. Similarly, the mean postmenstrual age at the time of diagnosis of type 1 ROP was 36.4 weeks of postmenstrual age. This information has led to the current screening recommendation outlined in the following text. Because the ROP that meets the treatment criteria may be reached after discharge from the neonatal intensive care unit, all the preterm infants who meet screening criteria and are discharged before they show resolution of the ROP or have mature retinal vasculature must continue to have ophthalmology examination on an outpatient basis. Fine, so this was about screening and who we have to screen, right? And now coming to the diagnosis. ROP is diagnosed by retinal examination with indirect ophthalmoscopy. This should be performed by an ophthalmologist with expertise in the ROP screening. Fine, this ROP screening is done by diagnosed by retinal examination. One second. By indirect ophthalmoscopy. Fine. In some NICU settings, screening is performed by the digital imaging and bedside exam. Using an indirect ophthalmoscopy is only performed when concerning image and findings are noted. The current recommendation is to screen all the infants with a birth weight of less than 1500 grams or a gestational age of less than 30 weeks. Infants who are born after 30 weeks of gestational age may be considered for screening if they have been ill, that is, have a severe respiratory distress syndrome. In more than 30 weeks, when we have to do? Fine, and after 30 weeks, when we have to consider for screening of this ROP, if the neonate had a severe respiratory distress syndrome, hypotension requiring pressor support, or surgery in the first several weeks of life. Because the timing of ROP is related to postmenstrual age, infants who are born at less than 7 weeks of gestation are examined at a postmenstrual age of 31 weeks, but those born at more than 28 weeks are screened at chronological age of 4 weeks. Fine, so this thing is important to remember. Less than or equal to 27 weeks are examined at the postmenstrual age of 31 weeks, and more than or equal to 28 weeks are examined at chronological age of 4 weeks. Fine, that is after 1 month. Patients with no ROP or indirect ophthalmoscopy are examined every 2 weeks until their vessels have grown out to the ora serrata and the retina is considered mature. Fine. So, for patients who do not have any ROP or indirect ophthalmoscopy, we have to examine them every 2 weeks until when? Until their vessels have grown out to the ora serrata and the retina is now mature. Infants undergoing telescreening usually have a weekly imaging unless they are considered to be very low risk. Infants more than 30 weeks of gestational age. If ROP is diagnosed, the frequency of the screening examination depends on the severity and rapidity of the progression of the disease. Now, coming to the classification and definitions. Let's first read about the classification. The International Classification of Retinopathy of Prematurity (ICROP) is used to classify the ROP. The classification system consists of four components. There is a first component is the location. Let's look at that. This refers to how far the developing retinal blood vessels have progressed. The retina is divided into three concentric circles or zones. There is zone 1, there is zone 2, and then there is zone 3. In zone 1 consists of an imaginary circle with the optic nerve at the center and a radius of twice the distance from the optic nerve to the macula. Fine. So yeah, let's look at this image and then we will read. So in zone 1 consists of an imaginary circle with the optic nerve at the center. See, in the zone 1, the optic nerve is at the center and a radius of twice the distance from the optic nerve to the macula. So it takes all the radius from optic nerve to the macula. From optic nerve to the macula, this distance is taken twice, and that's the radius of the circle. On zone 2 extends from the edge of zone 1. See, from the edge of zone 1, here from here it is extending to the ora serrata on the nasal side of the eye. This here is the ora serrata to the nasal side of the eye. So up to there, it's extending zone 2, and approximately half the distance to the ora serrata on the temporal side. Zone 3 consists of the outer crescent-shaped area extending from Zone 2 out to the ora serrata temporally. Right. So in the image you can see this is the zone 1, this is the zone 2, and this is the zone 3. And based on where the retinal blood vessels have progressed to, it is divided into three concentric zones or circles. Now in the first classification, first system was there were four components. First component is location. Second component is the severity, refers to the stage of the disease. So there are certain stages from stage 1 to stage 5. Let's look at them. Stage 1 is a demarcation line appears as a thin white line that separates the normal retina from the undeveloped avascular retina. So also let's understand this by the image. In stage 1, a demarcation line appears within the thin white line that separates the normal retina from the undeveloped avascular retina. See, where the vascularity has appeared, other than that there is a demarcation line. A thin white line can be seen. See, in stage 1, a thin demarcation line appears at the vascular avascular junction. Its structure is relatively flat and white, lying within the plane of the retina. Right? Let's see the stage 2. In stage 2, a ridge of fibrovascular tissues with the height and width replaces the line of the stage 1. So, which was a flat line in stage 1. In stage 1, there was a thin white line which was separating the normal retina from the undeveloped avascular retina, but that white line has developed into a ridge now, right? In stage 2, it has developed into a ridge now of what? A fibrovascular tissues with a height and a width of its own, which replaces the line of stage 1. It extends inwards from the plane of the retina. Let's see. In stage 2, a ridge evolves from the demarcation line. Here was a thin demarcation line. Now a ridge has evolved from the demarcation line. Height and color white to pink may vary and neovascularization can begin to form. See, this is the ridge we are talking about. Right? So what now in stage 3 what is happening? The ridge has extra retinal fibrovascular proliferation as abnormal blood vessels and fibrous tissue develop on the ridge edge of the ridge and extend into the vitreous. Okay, so what is happening in stage 3? Neovascularization extends from the ridge into the vitreous. So from this ridge, neovascularization is extending into the vitreous humor, right? Causing extraretinal fibrovascular proliferation is happening, right? Other than retina, because now the blood vessels are neovascularization is happening in the vitreous, which is not normal. There are no blood vessels in the vitreous, but Here, extraretinal fibroscular proliferation is occurring, which is continuous with the posterior aspect of the ridge. Okay, this was happening in stage 3. So, what is extraretinal fibrovascular proliferation is happening in stage 3. In stage 4, what is happening? Partial retinal detachment may result when the fibrovascular tissue pulls on the retina. So there's pulling movement on the retina, which is causing partial retinal detachment. Stage 4A is a partial detachment not involving the macula, so there is still chance of good vision. Stage 4A is what? It is not involving the macula. Stage 4B is a partial detachment, but that is involving the macula, thereby limiting the likelihood of good vision in that eye. Okay, let's see what is happening in the stage 4. There is basically partial retinal detachment. Stage 4A is sparing the macula, and stage 4B, which is involving the macula. So, now what is happening in stage 5? Now let's look at the last stage, stage 5. There is complete retinal detachment in the stage 5. The retina assumes a funnel shaped appearance and is described as either open or closed in the anterior and the posterior regions. Fine, what is the shape achieved? There is complete retinal detachment and with a funnel shaped appearance. Let's look at that. We can see the funnel shaped appearance here. See the retina is completely detached. In stage 5, total retinal detachment has occurred. These are generally tractional and can vary in a funnel configuration with optic disc visualization and presence of anterior segment abnormalities determining the subclassification. Right. Extent refers to the circumferential location of the disease and reported as claw covers in the appropriate zone. Moving ahead, this is how the ophthalmologic examination is being done. This is to be filled by the ophthalmologist. Moving ahead to the plus disease. What is that? So the oh, so we looked at in components. We looked at the location. We looked at the severity. Refers to the stage of the disease. Now, where's the third one? Oh, third one was the extent, I guess, which is covered by due to this image. Yeah. So third one was the extent. And now the fourth one is the fourth component of classifying is the plus disease. Is an additional designation that refers to the presence of vascular dilation and tortuosity of the posterior retinal vessels in at least two quadrants. This indicates a more severe degree of ROP and may also be associated with the iris vascular engorgement, pupillary rigidity, and the vitreous haze. So what is happening? There is presence of vascular dilation and tortuosity of the posterior retinal vessels in at least two quadrants. This indicates more severe degree of ROP. Okay, and may also be associated with iris vascular engorgement, pupillary rigidity, and vitreous haze. There is something called preplus disease, describes vascular abnormalities of the posterior pole that are present but are insufficient for the diagnosis of plus disease. Let's see certain definitions. First one is the aggressive posterior ROP. What is this? It is an uncommon, rapidly progressing severe form of ROP characterized by its posterior location. Usually, zone 1 is involved, and prominence of the plus disease out of the proportion to the peripheral retinopathy. Stage 3 retinopathy may appear as a flat intraretinal network of neovascularization. When untreated, this type of ROP usually progresses to stage 5, that is complete retinal detachment. Second definition is the threshold ROP. It is a historic term used for the classification of ROP requiring treatment under the old guidelines, but currently treatment is recommended for pre-threshold ROP. In the cryotherapy for retinopathy of prematurity study, treatment was recommended if the 5 or more contiguous or 8 cumulative claw covers of stage 3 with a plus disease in the either zone 1 or zone 3 is present. The risk of blindness was predicted to be at least 50% with a threshold ROP, and the cryo ROP study showed that the risk of blindness could be reduced to approximately 25% with treatment. Fine. So, this was something called threshold ROP. What is pre threshold ROP? It is any ROP in the zone 1. Where is zone 1? We have already seen, right? Let's look at the image. It is around the optic nerve only. Zone 1 consists of an imaginary circle with the optic nerve at the center and the radius of twice the distance from the optic nerve to the macula. What is the radius of the circle? It is the distance between the optic nerve and macula and double that distance. So this pre-threshold ROP is any ROP in the zone 1 less than the threshold ROP, and in zone 2, stage 2 ROP with plus disease, stage 2 ROP with a plus disease, stage 3 without plus disease, or stage 3 with plus disease but fewer than the requisite clock hours. Then the definite threshold ROP. Currently, severe ROP is categorized into type 1 and type 2 ROP. I think this is important here. I should mark it. In the cryotherapy of retinopathy of prematurity study, treatment for whom treatment was recommended according to this cryo-rope study, ROP study, treatment was recommended if 5 or more contiguous or 8 cumulative clock hours, 30-degree sectors are taken of stage 3 with a plus disease either in the zone 1 or the zone 2 were present. Right. So that's why this is a pre-threshold ROP, was also something similar to that. Pre-threshold ROP is any ROP in the zone 1 less than the threshold ROP. And so why we are calling it firstly pre-threshold ROP? Because it is less than threshold ROP. No. So any ROP in the zone 1 that is around the optic nerve, and in the zone 2, stage 2 ROP with a plus disease, stage 3 ROP without plus disease, or stage 3 with plus disease but fewer than the requisite clock hours in the definite threshold ROP. Right, let's look at the types of ROP. Severe ROP is categorized into type 1 ROP and the type 2. In the type 1, in zone 1, any ROP and the plus disease, or stage 3 with or without plus disease. This is important to remember when we are going to call it type 1 ROP. Type 1 ROP is defined as differently in different zones, in zone 1 and in zone 2. Zone 1, how is it defined? Any ROP and a plus disease in zone 1 if present, okay, or any ROP with stage 3 with or without plus disease. In zone 2, stage 2 or 3 ROP with plus disease. Fine. Any ROP in the zone 1 and stage 2 ROP, stage 2 or 3 ROP in the zone 2. So for zone 2, higher stage is required for it to call up type 1 ROP. For type 2 ROP, in zone 1, stage 1 or 2 ROP without plus disease. For type 1, we were having plus disease was required in zone 1. But in type 2, in zone 1, stage 1 or 2 without plus disease. And in zone 2, how is it different? Stage 3 ROP without plus disease. Stage 1 with plus disease was required. Right. Here also with plus disease. But here there is, in type 2, there is without plus disease. This is the cute little image that will help us to remember. Type 1. Sorry if this is irritating, but it's important to remember. And you can skip if you want. So, type 1, we have to treat these in zone 1, any stage with plus, stage 3 with or without plus. This was all for zone 1. For zone 2, stage 2 or 3 with plus. Okay. And type 2, we have to observe zone 1, for zone 1, stage 1 or 2 without plus, zone 2, stage 3 uh, without plus. Okay. Now let's move ahead. Timing of the treatment. Current recommendations are to consider treatment with for eyes with type 1 ROP based on the early treatment for the ROP randomized trial that show the significant benefit in the visual and the anatomic outcomes for the treatment of the eyes with the type 1 ROP compared to the eyes receiving treatment only if the threshold ROP developed. And B, close observation is currently recommended for type 2 ROP. Okay, we have to do observation for type 2 ROP. Treatment should be considered for an eye with type 2 ROP when progression to type 1 ROP occurs. Approximately 15% of the type 1 ROP approximately 15% of the type 2 ROP progress to the type 1 ROP. Fine. So we have to treat the type 1 ROP, then those we have to consider for early treatment. Consider treatment for the type 1 ROP. And when we have to treat type 2, when it progresses to type 1, and approximately 15% of the type 2 will progress to type 1. Let's look at these images. Digital image of the type 1 retinopathy of prematurity. In the image A and B, plus disease is present in both the right and the left eye, with stage 2 retinopathy of prematurity in the zone. And in the C image, the arrow shows examples of periretinal fibrovascular tissue posterior to the stage 2 ridge at the end of the retinal vessels. Right? Let's move ahead to the prognosis. Let's look at the short term prognosis and the long term prognosis. Short term prognosis risk factor for ROP requiring treatment include posterior location, that is either zone 1 or zone 2. So, yeah, this is a posterior location is a risk factor, which posterior location is basically zone 1 or zone 2. Presence of ROP on the first properly timed examination, increasing severity of the stage, circumferential involvement, the presence of plus disease, or a rapid progression of the disease. Most infants with the stage 1 or 2 ROP will experience spontaneous regression. We have read the stages, right? So most of the infants with the stage 1 or 2 ROP will experience a spontaneous regression. Treatment is recommended for type 1 eyes, and in the ET-ROP study, this reduced unfavorable visual outcome from 33 to 25%. Fine. We saw the type 1 ROP, right? Unfortunately, only 35% of the patients maintain visual acuity at 6 years of the age of 20 by 40 or better, suggesting more work to prevent the development of ROP is needed. Any zone 3 disease is an excellent prognosis for complete recovery. Right, any zone 3 has an excellent prognosis for complete recovery. Moving ahead into the long term prognosis. Infants with a significant ROP have increased risk of myopia, anisometropia, astigmatism, strabismus, amblyopia, late retinal detachment, and glaucoma. This is also important, that a significant ROP have increased risk of all these things. Cicatricial disease refers to the residual scarring in the retina and may be associated with the retinal detachment years later. Fine. What is cicatricial disease? There is residual scarring in the retina, and there may be retinal detachment years later. The prognosis for the stage 4 ROP depends on the involvement of the macula. The chance of for the good vision is greater when the macula is not involved. Obviously, once the we saw right in the stage 4A is where the macula is not involved, and in the stage 4B macula is involved. Once the retina has detached, the prognosis for the good vision is poor, even with the surgical reattachment. Although some useful visions may be preserved. All infants, all premature infants who meet the screening criteria, regardless of the diagnosis of ROP, are at risk for the long-term vision problems from either ocular or neurologic abnormalities. We recommend a follow-up evaluation of an ophthalmologist with the expertise in the neonatal sequelae at approximately 1 year of the age or sooner if the ocular or the visual abnormalities have been noted. Right. Now coming to its prevention. Currently, no proven methods are available to prevent the ROP. Multiple large clinical trials to prevent the ROP have been performed, evaluating the use of prophylactic vitamin E therapy, reduced exposure to the bright light, and administration of the penicillamine, but none of these have shown clear benefit. Non-randomized studies suggested that the lower or more tightly regulated oxygen saturation limitation in the early neonatal course may reduce the severity of ROP without adverse effects on the mortality. Okay, so a more tightly regulated oxygen saturation within limits in the early neonatal course may be done. Bronchopulmonary dysplasia. So this tightly regulated thing that will reduce the severity of ROP without any adverse effects on the mortality, bronchopulmonary dysplasia, or neurologic sequelae. However, more recent meta-analysis have suggested that in a group of infants with the restricted oxygen, there is higher mortality rate. uh, to prevent the ROP. We can't let the infant die. Although the meta-analysis also confirmed higher rates of ROP requiring treatment for infants in the higher oxygen saturation target range, this was not associated with the higher rate of blindness by 24 months. Let's look at the treatment of ROP. On treatment, we have laser therapy, anti-VEGF therapy, cryotherapy, retinal reattachment. That's it. Let's look at these treatment. So the first treatment is the laser therapy. Laser photocoagulation therapy for the ROP has been preferred initial treatment in the Mo Center. Right, this is the preferred initial treatment in most centers. Laser treatment is divided through an indirect ophthalmoscope and is applied for 360 degrees to the avascular retina anterior to the ridge of the extraretinal fibrovascular proliferation. An average of 1,000 spots are placed in each eye, but the number may range from a few hundred to approximately 2,000. So there is photocoagulation, that is what burning by using laser, and we saw, right, an average of 1,000 spots are placed in each eye, but the number may range from, what is the range, from few hundred to approximately 2,000. The procedure can be performed in the NICU. Yeah, this procedure can be performed in the NICU and usually with a local anesthesia and sedation, avoiding the potential adverse effects of the general anesthesia. Clinical observation and the comparative study suggest that the laser therapy is at least effective as a cryotherapy in achieving favorable visual outcomes, and while the success rate is good with regard to causing ROP regression, neither is 100% effective. Known complications include, what is the known complication of laser therapy? Development of cataracts, glaucoma, or the anterior segment ischemia following the laser therapy or the cryotherapy. So, yeah, these are the complications: cataract, glaucoma, or anterior segment ischemia. Moving ahead, second therapy is the anti-VEGF therapy. Intravitreal injections of the VEGF inhibitors is commonly used for ROP in the zone 1 or posterior zone 2. Aggressive posterior ROP, here also this anti-VEGF therapy is used as a salvage treatment after laser therapy or in conjunction with the vitreoretinal surgery. Although use of these agents for the ROP treatment is off-label, several studies have shown efficacy of this treatment. However, some concerns remains as to which agent and dose should be used because systemic absorption can result in reduced systemic vascular endothelial growth factor and potentially impede the normal vascularization of the other developing organs such as the brain or the lungs and can delay wound healing for the surgical patients. Right. So this is basically stopping the vascular endothelial growth factor against it. So this is stopping the normal vascularization that is happening at the same time, along with the vascularization in the retina. So it can affect the vascularization going ongoing in the brain and the lungs, that and can even delay the wound healing. Furthermore, the retina may never become fully vascularized, requiring long-term close follow-up after discharge from the NICU, with a risk of later reactivation. For this reason, many ophthalmologists plan to perform laser treatment after anti-VEGF therapy. Nevertheless, the ocular safety profile is reasonably good, although endophthalmitis is rare but potentially devastating complication. Some benefits of the intravitreal injections are short procedure time, less distress, discomfort requiring only topical anesthesia, and potentially long term benefits such as low rates of myopia. Right. Third treatment is the cryotherapy. A cryoprobe is applied to the external surface of the sclera, and the areas peripheral to the ridge of the ROP are frozen until the entire anterior vascular retina has been treated. Approximately 35 to 75 applications are required for each eye when performed as a monotherapy. The procedure is usually performed under general anesthesia. Cryotherapy causes more inflammation and requires more analgesia than the laser therapy, but may be necessary in special cases. Right. Now, the last treatment, that is retinal reattachment. Once the macula detaches in the stage 4B or 5 ROP, retinal surgery may be performed in an attempt to reattach the retina. So this retinal reattachment is done in stages 4B or 5 of ROP. Vitrectomy, with or without the lensectomy, and membrane peeling, if necessary, is performed to remove the tractional forces causing the retinal detachment. Right, so retinal detachment here occurs because of the tractional forces, and so we have to remove this tractional forces. For that, we are doing vitrectomy, with or without the lensectomy, and a membrane peeling, if necessary, is performed. A scleral buckling procedure may be useful for more peripheral detachment with drainage of subretinal fluid for the effusional detachments. Right. So there's something called scleral buckling procedure for more peripheral detachments with drainage of the subretinal fluid for effusional detachments. Right. So if the detachment is happening because of the effusion, then we have to drain that subretinal fluid also. Repeat operations for the recurrent attachment of the retina are common. Right, so there can be repeat operations can be required even if the retina can be successfully attached. With rare exception, the visual outcome is in the range of legal blindness. Even after the treatment, even after the retina has been successfully attached, the visual outcome can be blindness. Despite the low visual acuity measurement, children find any amount of vision useful. An untreated stage 5 of ROP eventually leads to no light perception vision. So if we leave the stage 5 of ROP, it lead to what? No light perception. The achievement of even minimal vision can result in large difference in child's overall quality of light. This was all about retinopathy of prematurity. Thank you.